Okay, so with the ramp there, I thought I'd just maybe spend a bit more time on that because you do want to make sure that the entry is properly defined and that you've got everything working graphically as well. So in the view here, you might have noticed before that I had some of the hatching missing, and that was simply because my subregions didn't line up. And so you might remember earlier importing the drawing to set those boundaries up, and that's why it's so important, because once you get issues with your subregions, it's very hard to line those things up. But if you have a drawing file, you can easily line everything up with that. And it'll become progressively harder and harder to work with those as you do more complex things.
With your ramp, one's design one where it doesn't actually dig into the ground, it goes like into the car park from the edge of the how do I explain it? Like of the boundary, so it doesn't actually dig in before it goes into it, you know what I mean?
So you've got your car park level up higher, do you?
Not really, it's where the ramp starts at the boundary of where my building is. Like it actually doesn't go in before you get to it.
Yeah, oh, so that means you'll need to go up then and then down.
That's
so
where
starting
it starts,
there.
it goes down.
Yep, so you can do that. So you just need to allow for the amount that you're going to go up first before going down. So that simply means your ramp is going to have a higher starting point. Okay. And so it'll be a bit longer than mine is probably, but again, it also depends how much you're setting the building down into the ground. Yeah, sure.
The ramp from the street access,
yeah.
That can be, has to be over the setback, right?
Yeah, that's right. So that there is... Oh, no, it can go through the setback. Yeah, so you can have the ramp in the setback area, that's okay.
Yep.
And so that's the boundary, as long as it's at the boundary.
Okay.
So you can have the ramp starting at the boundary, that's fine.
Yep.
And so it's really important there, if you want to know where the boundaries are in your section views, that you have a reference plane, because you obviously can't see the boundary line. And then with the footpath there, at the moment it's just following the natural gradient of the land, but once you start working things out a bit more accurately, you'll need to put in a footpath, and this is where topo surfaces just aren't good enough. And what you'll find in most firms where they use Revit for site works, most people use floors for as much as possible, and then only use the topo surfaces where really necessary. So here you could even do a pad, because the pad's going to cut out the topo surface as well, which will make it a bit easier to work out. So going back to maybe the base level that I've got, or I could use the street entry level. Okay, so what you can do, even though I don't have a street entry view, make sure you realise I've got a level that I've made called so street access, not street entry, but I don't have a floor plan for it. You don't need floor plans for every level, so I can draw it in this level, in this base plan base level floor plan. And so now if I go to make a building pad, then in properties I can always change it to that level, even though I don't have a floor plan for it. And I might go to the one with my satellite image just to make sure. Yep, so I've got the footpath area there, and so I'm just going to use pick lines, and actually so I've got to go to the one with my AutoCAD lines. Pick lines, and there I can pick those lines really easily. And we don't... Oh, I've got the lock option on probably, so here with pick lines you can see it's giving me a warning because I've got lock turned on there. That's okay though. You can always unlock it. And so there I'm going to pick the reference planes that I've used to define my footpath on the sides. And actually I'll just use this one. Obviously join those together. and then we'll check the thickness there. So that's probably too much for a footpath, so we'll just make a new pad called footpath and make that about 200. Probably wouldn't even be that. Okay, so tick to finish, and then in 3D you can see that's cutting a fair way into the site, which will give me a good idea how much I need to adjust the topo surface levels. And so to establish those, in the section view, I'm just going to check the level of my street access, because that's the level I've made my, or the height I've made my my pad, so it's 14,700. So it should be fairly simple now to go back into the plan, select topo surface, edit surface, and doesn't matter if I get a warning there, it's just telling me about the view range basically. So if I go place point and make the elevation 14,700, and as a minimum choose points on the corners of that pad. Then again, have a look in 3D. So it's joining fairly well, but you can see along the middle it's trying to raise up because I've got points up here that are higher. And the topo surface is really just giving you a line of best fit, or an average of those points. And if you have nearby points, obviously it's going to try and average your height to connect to those. So I'm going to go back here and edit surface again, and I can simply copy those points that I've already created. Every so often, and so what's that done? Let's do that again. So copy, and I'm going to turn multiple on. There we go, that's better. And just do a series of points, which will help to control the topo surface and keep it at the same height as the pad. It's important that you use a pad, not a floor, because if you use a floor, then the pad might, the topo surface might come over the top of it. And so then I can copy all of these points to the other side of the pad. And then also to the boundary. So let's make sure they're... Okay, so in reality the boundary, or the what is it? The verge between the footpath and the boundary is sloping, but we're going to make sure that near the driveway it's pretty close to being flat. So I'm just going to move these points right onto the boundary and then copy some on the side. So it doesn't matter what's happening down here so much, but definitely around that driveway we need to make sure that it's flat. So when I finish that, looking in the section now, we should see, there we are. Okay, so it's flat and connecting to the ramp there. So there's my pad, and I'm actually going to go back and check my site plan. So actually I've got an issue there. Oh yeah, sorry, so that pad should have been on this line. That's better. Yep. That's more like it. Okay, so there. So that's the important thing, that it's flat there. So you know, you'd be allowed to make changes to that that part of the verge there. So that'd be necessary, obviously, to get the transition from the footpath to the entry. And then you could actually do another pad to connect to the ramp. And well, I'm sure you can do that, so I won't bore you making you watch me do that. But then what I will show you is how to get the earth excavated beneath your ramp. So I'll start by just maybe getting the ramp to be the right width. So as a minimum it would be 5.5. I've got it 6.5 actually, so that's I think I've got it 4, sorry, so no, it does need to be 5.5, so I'm going to make that wider. There we are, so that still fits nicely between my grid lines, so that's good. And then with the run line, it's good if you can keep that centred. So by drawing a dimension one side to the other, you can try using the equals option, but just watch out for that one because it will often move the two sides. It's just one of those things. There are ways of getting around that, but in this case, probably easiest just to let it do what it wants to do and then adjust it afterwards. When we start doing more with families, I'll show you how you can get around that. And I don't know, has anyone tried maybe locking the side of something to a wall or something, and then having a dimension come out from that wall, and then have something centred between those two things, and using that equals option, and then you might find it'll give you an error or it won't work, and it's the same issue. But I'll show you there is a way to get around that. It's just that we have to use parameters, so I'll show you that later. So here though, I can just use the align tool. Should make life a bit easier. Oops. But again, I'll need to try and centre that afterwards. Just one of those things. Wish they get equals to work a bit better, but at least you've got the option. You can see there it's trying to move that thing, so I'll do the locking. Oops. There we are. And that should solve it. So I don't need to redo this line because of course equals will keep it centred. And it's mainly just for the arrow. When we get the up arrow and the down arrow, or we just want an up arrow, you want to make sure that's in the middle. Alright, so again here, doesn't hurt to draw the equals in first. Sometimes actually it works much better. And then align afterwards. So don't go overboard with your locking, but it can definitely help in some situations. And so now I can put a pad in under the ramp, and you have to be careful with your pads because they can't overlap. So it's really important there to have the ramp done first and be pretty sure of the position, or at least have it set up so that the ramp, the pad can move with the ramp. So now if I go to make a building pad, I'll start with this one. Pick lines, locks turned on, so I can just hover there and try and use tab. No, not working for me, so I'll just pick each line separately. Making sure I get the lines of the ramp, not the boundary. And then, to make it slope, you can draw a slope arrow. Okay, so if I draw a slope arrow there, often it's easiest just to draw the arrow. Doesn't really matter which way you draw it because you can set the height for each end. So the trick there is then to select the slope arrow afterwards, and then you can change the properties. So we know that firstly actually the topo surface, so the pad needs to have a level, and so I'm going to set that to street access. and then make it have an offset equal to my ramp thickness, which I think is 200. I'll have to check that, but I think it's about that. And then now I can select the slope arrow, and we can say specify height at tail. So that's here. And I'll just bring that out so you can see what this says. Okay, so you've got height offset at tail, height offset at head. So I want the height offset at tail to be 200, which is the amount that ramp rises. And then the height offset at head, I'll leave it 0. Tick to finish. Right, and there you have it. So that's now cutting away that part of the ground. So I'm probably going to check my thickness there. So I'm going to, well actually I've got to make a new pad as well. So I'm going to make a new one that is just for the foundations. So it's not for footing. So we'll make this foundation fill, or hardcore, no, just foundation fill is fine, and then make that maybe 100. Okay, so then I need to make the offset greater, so that will be minus, well actually I'm just going to use the arrow keys there to nudge it down. So minus, what is it, minus 360 roughly. So if we turn thin lines on, we can see it more precisely and move it exactly if you really want to. But it's going to be an arbitrary number. Minus 350 sounds good. But that's not going to, it's going to overlap a little bit. With the line weights back on, no, you won't see that. Okay, so that's the basic process, and you can do the same thing for the other part of the ramp. And so just going back to the car park, I'll put a couple of things there. So, yeah, so you can make the car park base wider, just make sure you set up your own types and put in the correct properties that you'll see in the Australian Standard for both your regular car spaces and disabled access. Where are we? Yeah. Right, so you've got the regular car park size here in the table. Where is it? I'm sure you know it. I've gone past it. Oh yeah, I've gone to the part on ramps. Here we are. There we are. Okay, so make sure you're looking at that table to get your bay sizes, and then for the disabled access, of course, you've got the other standard I showed you before, which will give you those sizes. So that's your minimum, but when you're doing your layouts, you may need, or maybe better to have larger bays. They don't need to be the minimum. And so you can see here I've made mine 2600 because it works better with the span that I want. It fits in better. And it may give me some room to play with when I do the columns and other things. So it's good to think about, allowing for extra room, and you don't always have to design to the minimum. And so again, just think about those things when you're doing your layout. And the final thing I'll just point out there is it'll help you a lot once you have an idea of the width of the building to put in a centre line. That's something a lot of people forget. But many things are going to be symmetrical. And so here, with the car parking bays there, it's fairly easy just to select those and using mirror, choose the axis there to flip them on the other side, and you'll find lots of things when you're building these symmetrical. So centre lines will help you a lot. And by using the equals dimension, based on your grids. If your walls do move or your building changes size, that should always stay centred. And that's a really important concept, especially when we start going more into families, establishing those critical reference points. Okay, so I'll go through massing next, but give some time just to maybe keep working on that for a little while.